1963 from Oregon State University. He was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army Reserve, eventually rising to the rank of captain. He was trained in military intelligence and deployed overseas in Norway and in South Korea. Currently, Daniel is president of the Rogue Valley Veterans for Peace. Chapter 156.
Evan, would you cut this?
Yep.
Thank you, Evan. I first say that I am not an expert on nuclear weapons. I'm not an expert on any of these topics, but I am somebody that with a lifetime interest in history, and I do believe that we have to take a role in influencing what our government does in our name. And I've been kind of concerned that Veterans for Peace did not have out a national statement on this crisis looming with Iran, but I'm glad to say that today they issued a press release, and they kind of went with United for Peace and Justice, another organization, and I would like to say what Veterans for Peace and United for Peace and Justice have said about this. They said the U.S. government should state its intentions to resolve the conflict with Iran, between Iran and Israel, with diplomacy and negotiations and not the use of force. We need a clear statement that we're not going to use force. The U.S. government should exercise the full range of diplomatic, economic, and political influence to prevent the nuclear-armed state of Israel from attacking Iran. That is a responsibility we have to take seriously. The U.S. should have an immediate cessation of economic sanctions and threats of war against Iran. You can't talk with them while you're threatening the big stick at the same time. There's just no way that they're going to listen. And on the issue of the economic sanctions, they're crippling. They could be considered by Iran as an act of war. And we have to look at it a little bit from the point of view of Iran and the people in Iran. The U.S. government, and this one I'm glad to say, the U.S. government should support a regional accord in establishing a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. That's the same thing as a nuclear free zone. A weapons of in the Middle East, and call for the United Nations Security Council resolution that Herb mentioned before, 687, Article 14, in order to end this cycle of coercion and fear. We do not know that Iran has a nuclear weapon. We know that they have nuclear enrichment. They're entitled to do that. So that is what the stand of Veterans for Peace. I'd like to say that I commenced my service when Herb was working on nuclear abolition. I commenced my service at Oregon State University in 1978. Most of my service was as a reservist. I am not an expert on any of these things. I've trained as an armor and infantry officer. But Veterans for Peace believes that people who have served the United States, and it's an organization of members, and men and women, who have, and associate members who have, our purpose is to persuade our government that war and threats of war are not the way to get anything accomplished in the world. And that's why I'm here, and I'm glad that Veterans for Peace has put out that position. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to speak any longer than that. If I was going to say anything else, I forgot it. I thought we were going to put that up on the screen. We don't have that, though. If you can see this, in considering the current situation with Iran, we need to consider that the United States has invaded the country to the east. That was Afghanistan. Then we've invaded the country to the west. That was Iraq. And we have a bunch of weapons, a bunch of aircraft based within range of Iran. Of course, the aircraft carriers off the coast. Is it any wonder that the Iranians are feeling a little bit threatened? What does a nation have to do to get the imperial boot of the United States off its throat? Well, North Korea doesn't have an imperial boot on their throat anymore. But the United States is not threatening to bomb or invade North Korea. In fact, didn't I hear just the other day that we're, and of course, it's an ongoing process. They've gone back on their words numerous times. But the United States is engaging to have food deliveries and other kinds of aid necessary to help the people of North Korea. What is it about Iran that we can't negotiate with real faith? It's not in, somebody said Israel, and certainly the AIPAC, the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, certainly has a tremendous influence. But it's not in the interest of Israel for us to threaten war with Iran. We need to have a real basic change. And the Iranians do have a long memory. They know that in 1953, the CIA organized a coup and overthrew their democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. And since then, there has been a long series of aggressions and control measures. We introduced a 25-year, the Shah, who was absolute ruler of Iran for 25 years, was forced down the throat of the Iranian people. When I started in the service, 1978, was the time of the Iranian hostage crisis. And I remember at that time saying we should have B-50, thinking we should have B-52s blackening their skies. Well, thank God we didn't do that. Thank you.